Welcome to the Advancement Podcast. Our mission is to reach the lost in America by advancing leaders and churches so that communities are transformed. Join us as we discuss how to stay healthy as leaders, work in teams, and lead change. Come on, let's advance together.
Yeah. Welcome back to another episode of the Advancement Podcast. I guess this is the new studio edition. Yeah. If you're enjoying the podcast, if you could do us a favor and go subscribe or leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast, whether it be Apple, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you find your podcast, would you please help us spread the word of the Advancement Podcast? If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, go and like the Advancement Podcast page on Facebook, or subscribe to the YouTube channel, or do all the above, because that's fun, right?
We'll fine. We'll take it all.
Yeah. So my name is Todd Barham. I am the host of the Advancement Podcast, joined, as always, with the president of Advancement, or what is it, lead consultant, you want me to call you? Both president, lead consultant.
You call me, yeah, I am both. But
head worker bee at Advancement, Timothy D. Ware. How you doing today, Tim?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing
phenomenal. So you almost killed me last week. Do we want to talk about that? We went on a 6.5 mile hike, something that we were testing out here at Advancement.
Yeah, we're testing something. We want to try an event to get pastors out.
Yeah,
and where we had a spirituality component. Yeah. And
on National Day of Prayer, we did
on National Day of Prayer. Yes, I've been trying to think if I was going to say, there were 4 people.
Yeah, 4 people. 5, including you.
Including me. Now, that was the max they let us have in this as things are reopening in the park.
Because we're good citizens of the United States.
That's right. So as we're reopening, that's the minimum we could, our maximum we could have together in our group. And we're out hiking these trails, and we did go a little longer than I'd planned.
A little bit.
But I just thought it was the old man was like, and all these young folks were. You said Crystal slept like 12 hours.
Yeah, she was asleep by 9 o'clock, but I was proud of her. She's not really an outdoorsy gal, no. So she actually went to the bathroom outside for the first time in her life. She not only did it once, she did it twice. And so that was big. That was big for her. That was big. She felt super accomplished after that.
That is pretty big for somebody if they've never done that before.
Well, she's a city girl, man. She never her idea of camping's an RV.
I know. So. That debate went on multiple times behind as we walked that trail. But we hope to start doing that in a more organized fashion.
Yeah, stay tuned.
So yeah, good days. I think there's just something about God speaks differently when you get into a different environment, and most people don't get into that environment.
Yeah.
So going into that
nature's
outdoor,
a great place for that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
so last episode we talked about building healthy tension, or what does healthy tension do? And he talked about 5 things. Let me recap them real quick. Okay. Right. First thing is it holds things together. Second thing, it brings alignment. Third thing is the key to movement. Fourth thing is it increases celebration moments. And 5, it strengthens us. So let me give a little caveat. If you did not listen to the last episode, I'd like to encourage you to go listen back to those 5 points, because Tim unpacks them a little bit more. Today, we're going to go into that a little bit more. And so the first question I want to ask you is, what are effective ways? We talked about the car in the last episode and putting the right amount of friction. What are some healthy ways to build healthy tension?
Well, leadership is about managing tension.
Okay.
Having the right amount, knowing when to push, when to let up. That's how you move people.
Yeah.
On our hike, I'd let y'all rest, and then I'd say, okay, it's time to move.
Right.
It's time to go. Okay. I knew when we came up out of the river and we walked up there, and it was basically flat. Then we came up a slight incline that had that one weird step that the old guy fell on.
Yeah, he fell on, yeah.
And I knew that we were fixing to double back and take the steepest incline of the day.
Right.
And the first thing I did was say, you guys ought to go walk out here and take a look. This is kind of a nice overlook.
Go look.
I gave you
an opportunity to rest.
An opportunity to take a break, but I knew what was ahead.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, it's time. Let's go.
Right.
And, the huffing was happening behind me.
Well, that incline just seemed to get steeper and steeper and steeper and steeper. Like, are we going to be climbing by the end of this?
But then we get to a place, and I remember Crystal going, oh, look where we got to.
Yeah.
So there's this, the leadership piece is about that, saying, okay, I put enough tension in them. I'm going to ease off to something they can handle. Then I'm going to push them again. So it's those back and forth. So how do we do it? Number one, I think for pastors, vision is one of it's probably the number one tension tool that pastors have in their tool bag.
Okay. Having
a clear vision, something you can state again, something you can preach again, something you can reinforce. And, sometimes you can we've all done it, guys, God's call, if we talk about the vision to reach the lost in the world, you can press that, and you can press that. Some days I don't need to press it as hard.
Yeah.
But there are sometimes but vision is a tool that we have. And what's beautiful about vision is it gives us the ability to create consistent tension that we can ramp up. But when it comes back to static, it's never gone.
Yeah. So give us an example of when tension blew up in your face and what you learned from, because let's just be honest. We've all had those moments where we're pushing, we think we're doing a good thing, but we just pushed a little too hard and things didn't go
great. I was, thinking about, as I told that shared vision, I mean, that's just one of the ways one of the tools we have in our tool bag. But I was working with a church. I was leading a church, and my wife and I carry a strong burden for people that don't know Christ,
as we all should.
And I was casting this vision of reaching the community in everything I did. I was pushing, I was driving the vision of the lost with everything in me. And we said it in the last episode that some people can handle tension in one area and they can't handle it in another. Right. Basically you have a higher tolerance for tension in one place than you do in somewhere else. And this whole idea of, if we're going to reach the lost, it means we can't do things like we've done them in the past.
Right.
And I misinterpreted how much tension the board could handle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they had a high tolerance for tension for the lost. In other words, it wasn't a high enough priority that I had not gotten to the place where I'd created enough tension to move them down that road.
Right.
But my pressing tension there and the need to do something, what I didn't realize is that there was this tension over here. They had a low tolerance for tension around doing something different.
Right.
And where I saw this, and I knew that we needed to change, but I was trying to press this urgency over here and create tension here. I was trying to create tension around reaching the lost. But what I did was I created tension around change. I knew I would, but I was hoping that one would supersede the other. And to be honest, I did I drove too hard. and that high tolerance for the harvest didn't move very fast. They didn't move at all.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, there was some what is likely to be irreparable damage done to those relationships, to a couple of those relationships.
Okay.
I mean, I think as leaders, we have to make sure that we don't assume that the tension in us is the same as tension in someone else. And we have, so that communication piece, it blew up. I mean, that whole exodus from that church and everything eventually did not turn out well. I mean, and we can trace it back to this season of vision casting over. I held the pedal down too hard, too long.
Yeah.
Now, but it doesn't mean that vision's not a great tool. I think another great tool for creating vision or attention is open-ended questions. You know, in the coaching world, they say that self-discovery is more powerful than being someone telling you. So the open-ended questions, we made the joke that I ask you, what's your takeaway?
Sure.
I'm not telling you, but there's always, okay, he's going to ask me this. So there's a little tension. It makes you listen for something.
Right.
And so when you ask those questions and of the person that on your team that's just not getting it done, and you go, I can say, I see you're not doing this. I can see you're not doing this. I can see you're not doing this. Or I can ask a question. So let's take your food pantry that we talked about last time. Okay.
Take it on the food pantry.
Take on the food pantry.
Which it does reach the loss, by the way.
Yeah. But let's take on your food pantry. That's your free food pantry outside your church door. Y'all, it's stocked, and if you had somebody that's supposed to stock it all the time and they're not getting it stocked, it's easy to go, hey, you're not doing your job.
Right.
And then they can say, well, but I can, that creates tension. But I could also say, what's going on? Why? Open-ended questions are not what questions as much as they are why. They're whys. Why are you, why has it been so hard for you to follow through?
Mm-hmm.
So by putting follow through in there, why is it hard for you to follow through? Now I'm going to put tension in their heart, because now they have to not only respond to me, but they have to look inward and reconcile this position.
Yeah.
So an open-ended question is a good way for us to create healthy tension. I think another a tool is accountability.
Okay.
Sometimes we're not good at accountability in the church.
Well, let me ask a question on accountability, because a lot of us are leading younger and younger and younger leaders. And this is something I've experienced in my pastoring and leading millennials and younger.
Gen Z.
And I'm a millennial, so I'll preface that from the get-go. So I'm not dogging millennials. I believe millennials are the future, but just like your generation doesn't know how to work a computer, we don't know how to deal with accountability.
I'm Gen X. I am not a boomer.
Anyway, so
we're the generation that Apple was birthed in.
Yeah.
So be nice to us.
We're the generation that made it better. So Tim and I give each other a hard time. There's no tension to our relationship because we love each other.
Yeah, that's right.
So how do we effectively help our staff, leaders, whatever, that are of a younger generation that don't deal well with accountability? Now, I know I'm picking on the millennials, but really in our culture as a whole, accountability is not something that we do well with. So how do we walk in that? Because accountability has to happen, but how do we keep it from constantly having people frustrated and upset because we're pushing them and keeping them accountable and holding them to be better?
historically, if we look back at society, we can go back to, it was what I would say, a very vertical power structure. There was a king, there was a president, there's a general, there's a boss.
Hierarchy.
Right. There's this hierarchy piece. You do what you're told.
Yeah. And you don't question it.
And you don't question it.
That's how I was brought up.
Right. You do it, you do it, you do it, you do it, you do it. And if you don't do it, there's consequences.
Right.
But at the same time, I mean, there's all this too, there's the camaraderie of these lower level places where people are all experiencing the same thing. Today's culture is much more, and this is the millennial generation really has brought this into prominence, is what we would say, instead of being a vertical, it's much more horizontal. In my generation, you had to earn the right. You got first invited into a meeting when you got a promotion or you come on staff somewhere. You're the young guy. You have to earn the right to be heard, which means you have to sit there and be quiet for a while until they'll ask you when they want your opinion. You're not supposed to give your opinion until they ask.
Right.
You've got to earn cred.
Uh-huh.
But in today's world, it's the opposite. It's the idea is, well, you've invited me into this room because you want my opinion. So we have a much more horizontal society. And the truth is, this is in the 1970s, and there were university professors that first started talking about the difference about being postmodern. Mm-hmm. And the idea of postmodernism. And postmodernism really didn't come to prominence in commonplace dialogue until the millennials here. Again, this is a millennial component. And the millennial and following groups have decided that you guys were raised in an idea that there are no real absolutes.
Right.
And when there are absolutes, accountability is much easier. When there's no absolutes and everything's general, what's right for you isn't necessarily right for me. And so how can you hold me accountable to your standards because this is me? I get to be me. Now, that makes it tough. That means that you're only held accountable if you're the president or
right.
you're the senior pastor. There's only certain people end up being held accountable. So I think one of the things we have to, which I'm not saying the old way was better, because there was unhealthy accountability.
Sure.
It's just like there could be unhealthy accountability.
We see the abuses of power from that. And,
absolutely.
And people going and doing things that are never checked. Let's take a moment and hear a word about advancement.
Do you feel like your church is stuck in a rut? Then we've got the answer for you here at Advancement. Do you need some personal coaching or maybe some leadership coaching? We can help you out. Contact the Advancement team at info@advancement.cc or check out the website at advancement.cc.
Now let's get back to the podcast.
So one of the things we have to do is we have to teach people healthy accountability.
Right.
There's a great book out there called Crucial Accountability on this subject, and it's really built into a business world, but it's still a great book out there. I think accountability is also the kingdom. This is an important thing in the kingdom.
Sure.
I mean, when we get to heaven, the Bible says that we're all going to stand before them. We're going to be held accountable. And if we don't come to understand accountability here, then that's going to be a rude awakening day.
Yeah.
So we have to help our people learn to understand accountability. Now, the other thing that the problem with when people in your generation look at accountability is they see the hierarchy that you're only that I'm accountable to you.
Right.
But in the kingdom, this is supposed to be mutual accountability. The best teams are accountable to each other.
Right.
Not just the leader. A senior pastor is accountable to their congregation, to their board, to their team, to their community. So I would actually say that the higher you go in leadership, the more accountable you become.
Yeah.
And that's not the way we want to project it. We want to say the more freedom we have, but I would say we actually have less freedom. But if we don't do accountability, and that's why I say there's tension around this, because this is a great place to work on healthy tension. Here's your food pantry illustration. The person wasn't filling it. I can just let them keep going, and me and my kid will go up there and fill it anyway, and not hold them accountable, and leave zero tension there, which means if we go back to our earlier illustration that of blood pressure being too high or blood pressure being too low, this is dead or dying.
Right.
The only way I have to ask that question, what's the deal here? I have to use that accountability to create tension, because they should grow and the ministry should grow because of it. And does that satisfy, or because I want to your answer on accountability?
Yeah, it does. So basically, kind of what you're getting at is the best way to build accountability is team accountability based around the vision pieces that we've already set in place. So what I hear you saying is that as we build, we should be able to, it's almost easier to hold each other accountable in a team setting than personally. Is that what you're saying?
Well, in the past, let's just talk about it in the pastorate. For a new believer, I want to hold them accountable, but I'm going to hold them accountable they need to understand, begin learning accountability. But accountability is, are you going to make the church? Are you going to be involved in some level of discipleship?
Right.
Are you growing some? I'm not expecting you to grow fast. I'm expecting you to grow. And once they've matured and I want to put them in as an entry-level worker, they're not, they're just a volunteer who's coming once a month.
Right.
Okay, now I'm going to hold them accountable for making sure that did they get their background check done? Did they, you can't do it till you've done these things to go to the training. So the accountability level goes up. And then, the next level, I'm going to put you on to now you're going to move from being just the lowest level volunteer to the next level. So this increase eventually when they're on my team, there's accountability. Now, all the way through, this is building a structure of accountability. The higher you go, the higher the accountability. Of course, as the leader, I'm accountable if I'm the senior pastor, I'm accountable to everybody.
Yeah.
So it flows both ways, and you have to teach people that. So how do I teach the new believer that accountability goes both ways? If I show up, if he calls me and says, hey, are we going to meet tomorrow for a discipleship meeting? And you go, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you're late or you're unprepared, then you have to say, okay, I owe you an apology. And you have to make yourself accountable to them, which may be, I've got a lot going on right now because we've got a new baby at the house or whatever.
Sure.
Would you text me, make sure and text me the day before or 2 days before so that I can make sure I'm prepared, because this snuck up on me.
Right.
So now I've made myself accountable to the person below me. So accountability has to flow both ways, and it should work at every level of the church. And that's I would tell you that probably the reason discipleship is as anemic in the church today as it is because we do not have a good accountability structure involved in our discipleship processes.
Okay.
So I think another tool that you like for tension, that another tool at our disposal is also goals.
Yeah.
We've got to get here. We set goals now. It's just like everything else. I set the goal too high.
Disappointment.
Right.
And then we can never achieve it.
Right. So I set it too low, then there's not enough tension. The win feels hollow. It's
right.
like the number one team playing the worst team. Who's amped up about playing that game or watching that game? Nobody.
Yeah.
Nobody. So that moment of, so having the goal in the right place, is how you manage that tension. But it's a great tool. There are others, but those are my top 4. Would probably be vision, goals, open-ended questions, and accountability.
Yeah. So what would you say to a pastor that's in a situation that he feels like if he adds more tension, he adds more accountability to his board, staff, whatever, that everything is going to break apart? What would you say to that pastor? Because I know there's guys listening, guys and gals listening out there that like, yeah, all this tension's great, but I feel like if I add more tension, the organization's going to crumble.
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to look inside your heart and see and look at the tension, at your internal tension.
Okay.
Because sometimes I think for leaders, we can always move faster than the people behind us.
Mm-hmm.
The larger the organization, the slower it's going to move. And, all right, Todd, how many times have you and I talked about pace, that they can't move as fast as you? You're going to kill them.
Yeah.
You're going to kill them.
Yeah.
And I think probably oftentimes it's about me managing the tension in my heart. I have to go evaluate it and see, okay, am I applying tension in the wrong place? Am I pushing the wrong thing? Am I pushing them too hard? I have to look out, but I also have to look inward and say, I am not managing my personal tension well and not allowing for the process and the pace to move things, because you just got to know it will never move as fast as you want it to move.
Oh, sure.
And it will never move as fast as you can do it by yourself.
Right.
But you can't, but you can't go as far. So this idea of the first thing I would do is look inside and make sure that I am not the problem.
Okay.
Because usually I am. Now, the second thing I would do is go in and say, okay, I would look at where I'm putting the gas down and ask myself, if I only have so much energy. There's only 100%. Let's say it that way. If I remove from here and I put more here, is there, play with some combinations. Take a little pressure off here, apply a little more here, play with the combination and see which combination gets you the movement you're at. Because it could be based on which team, which person, current circumstances. So adjusting those, playing with those pieces where you're applying tension and where you, because it's the combination can be as critical as anything.
Right. Yeah. Well, Tim, is it time for us to wrap up?
Yeah, man.
So what would you say is the number one thing that we need to focus on regarding tension in our team and how to build healthy tension?
I think you can't be afraid to talk about it.
Okay.
I would say that these podcasts, for instance, this would be a good thing to have your teams listen to, because they need to understand. This is part of their development too,
right? Because
they have to lead too. And usually, a lot of what you're asking guys to do is you're pushing this whole idea of your team. If they're not managing the tension below them well,
right,
then they're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think people pick up on pick this up by osmosis.
Yeah.
The truth is, most people don't even think of leadership and tension this way.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had this conversation with lots of people. That's why I've developed these 5 things over time. I've got, because I've repeated it again and again and again and again with leaders. And I think that what you have to do is don't be afraid of, that's the other thing, is you can't be afraid of tension. You have to be willing to put tension in the room. I have another pastor I work with and mentor, and he called me last week and he said, I'm going to a meeting. He said, I'm going to put good tension in the room. So because he and I talk about good tension, bad tension all the time, and he said, I'm gonna put good tension in the room.
Yeah.
So as long as teach people that, and then don't be afraid of tension.
Yeah.
That's how I would say it. So what's your takeaway?
The one thing that I like that you said was vision. Vision is our number one tension tool that we have in our bag. And I think as a leader, one of our biggest things is to build a good enough vision picture so that our team can feel the tension of where we're going. And I think sometimes either we as leaders, we don't have a clear enough vision in our hearts that we even know where we're going. And so sometimes I think that our tension is misguided from time to time because our team can be frustrated with, they're not even sure where they're going, what goals they're reaching, how they're going to reach it. And I just like that. It kind of clarified for me. A good, clear vision is where the stability comes in tension.
I think vision is also kind of transient. And what I mean by that is if I'm leading a church that's small, I don't need quite as much clarity as I do the larger I get. At 100, I use the illustration all the time. I say that that at 100, I need vision. It's dot to dot. I need this, if you look at the dot to dot coloring books, there's a few lines here. I got clarity here. And then there's a basic outline, and I can kind of tell most of the time kind of what it is.
Right.
But I don't need much more than that to lead volunteers and to move when I'm small. By the time I'm at the 200 thing, I want to have the lines. I want to have all the dot to dot done. Okay, this is the picture. The larger I get, the more detail is added.
Yeah.
Because the more details required to move the mass. Mm-hmm. So it's all there. Vision is there, but I think we can, if we're not careful, we can, vision can become too heavy if it's too clear, it can become too heavy for a small organization to bear. It now becomes the unachievable goal we talked about earlier.
Right. Yeah.
So, which is again, managing tension. I may be able to see all that clarity, but that doesn't mean I can vomit it out on my team.
Sure.
Or on my church.
Well, Tim.
Hey.
Another good episode.
Another one in the books.
So go subscribe and like us, and thanks for joining us on the Advancement Podcast, and we'll see you next time
on the Advancement Podcast, new studio edition.
Yeah.
If you would like to keep this content coming, all Tim and Todd ask is $1 per show. See how to give, maybe even sponsor an episode or series on the website advancement.cc. Until next week, continue to advance the mission of Jesus.